They told you America was the land of opportunity. But what if I told you the truth was far darker, that behind a locked bedroom door in Los Angeles in 1970, a child had been deliberately erased from human life itself? Imagine it, a girl 13 years old, standing silent in a welfare office, her body frail, her face slack, her eyes darting like a hunted animal. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't even look at the people around her. And yet her presence froze the room, because what they saw wasn't a child. It was evidence of a nightmare that no one wanted to believe could exist in a modern, civilized nation. The girl's name was Genie, but that name was not her identity. It was a placeholder, a symbol for what happens when silence is weaponized, when institutions look away, and when a family becomes a prison more suffocating than iron bars. Her story is not just about abuse. It is about control. It is about how silence can be engineered, how identity can be erased, how a human being can be stripped down into something the world no longer recognizes. And once you understand what happened to her, you will never see your society, or yourself, the same way again. Genie's nightmare began not with her, but with her father. A man who despised sound. A man who built his home not as a sanctuary, but as a fortress of silence. His obsession turned into a system, and that system turned into a regime. He sealed the windows with aluminum foil, not just to keep out the sun, but to keep out time itself. He created a shrine to his dead mother, while creating a prison for his living daughter. The walls of that house absorbed silence like a commandment, and no one, not the neighbors, not the schools, not the community, dared to interfere. And then came the accident. A nearly blind woman walked into the wrong welfare office in Los Angeles on November 4th, 1970. He was not looking for salvation. She was looking for disability payments. But at her side stood her daughter, a girl whose very posture revealed a history of restraint, neglect, and something far worse. Genie shuffled instead of walked, her arms bent in front of her chest like an animal bracing for attack. She weighed just 59 pounds at the age of 13. She did not know how to swallow properly, did not control her own bladder, did not speak any human language. She was not feral in the sense of wolves or wilderness. She was feral because man had made her so. The staff who saw her that day froze. They had handled thousands of cases, seen every form of poverty, every bruise hidden beneath clothing, every desperate parent. But this was different. This was not poverty. This was a crime that had lasted over a decade. This was not just a child who had been denied food. This was a child who had been denied existence itself. Within hours, the system that had ignored her for years suddenly activated. Police, doctors, journalists, and all of them thought they were about to rescue her. They thought they were about to rewrite her life. But what none of them realized was this. Genie was not just a victim of her father's house. She was about to become a victim of the system that took her in, because once the world knew her name, she was no longer just a child, she was an experiment, and that is the true horror of Genie's story. She was studied like a specimen, probed for what she could reveal about language, about the human brain, about development. She became a living experiment in forbidden science. What happens if a child grows up without words, without touch, without love? For scientists, she was not a tragedy. She was an opportunity. But for Genie herself, the nightmare was only beginning. Step inside that house on Golden West Avenue, not as a neighbor glancing at the lawn, not as a passing stranger, but as someone who dares to open the door. What you find is not a home. It is a mausoleum of the living. The air is stale, thick with the odor of waste, confinement, and despair. The light has been strangled out by aluminum foil stretched across the windows, turning the rooms into tombs. Even at midday, the shadows are absolute. Silence doesn't just hang there, it reigns. In the center of one room stands an object that masquerades as furniture, but functions as a cage, a crib reinforced with chicken wire. Next to it, a potty chair with straps bolted crudely to its frame. This is not childhood, this is design. Day after day, Genie was strapped into that chair. By night, she was locked into that crib. Movement was not permitted, exploration was not permitted, speech was punished. Even the faintest sound, a cry, a laugh, A call was answered by violence. Her father growled at her like a dog through the door. Other times, the crack of a wooden plank silenced her into whimpers. Soon, even whimpers became too dangerous, and so silence became survival. You must understand, this was not neglect. Neglect is passive. This was active erasure. Every aspect of Genie's environment was engineered to suppress the natural emergence of humanity. She was not deprived accidentally. She was suppressed deliberately. Every restraint, every sealed window, every whisper forced on her siblings was part of a system. That system had an architect, her father, Clark Wiley, a man whose life was forged in abandonment, loss, and resentment. He grew up in Oregon under another name, Pearl, in a brothel where his mother worked. He carried suspicion like a parasite from his earliest days. He drifted through foster care. He grew to hate sound itself, because for him, noise always meant bet, rail, exposure, conflict. By adulthood, he had shed the name Pearl for Clark, as though erasing the past would erase the scars. But scars don't vanish, they metastasize. Clark built his life around silence. He built shrines to the dead and prisons for the living. When his mother, the only figure he ever revered, died in a car crash in 1958, the fragile stability he clung to shattered. He withdrew completely. Neighbors barely saw him. He carried a firearm even inside his own house, as if the world outside might at any moment burst through the walls. He commanded whispers from his family. He ruled through fear, through control, through silence. And at the very center of his obsession, he singled out his youngest daughter, Genie, as the one who must be most erased. Imagine the psychological weight of that design. For 13 years, Genie never heard laughter, never heard a bedtime story, never saw the difference between dawn and dusk. The only constants were straps, shadows, and silence. Her world was not absence, it was calculated deprivation. But here's the truth the institutions would never admit to you. Clark's prison was not unique. It was simply the private, concentrated version of what entire systems do to you on a larger scale. He sealed windows so Genie could not see the light. Institutions seal truths so you cannot see reality. He punished sound so she would never learn language. Systems punished dissent so you never develop your voice. His obsession turned his house into a laboratory of silence. But outside those walls, society itself is another laboratory, one that does the same thing, just more subtly, more beautifully packaged. And this is why Genie's story is dangerous knowledge, because once you see the architecture of silence in that house, you cannot unsee the architecture of silence in your own. When police first stepped into that bedroom, they recorded the chicken wire, the foil, the stench. They logged it into evidence, but what they didn't realize was this. The room itself was a message, a design, a system of control. It told them, in physical form, what power does when it fears sound, when it fears truth, when it fears freedom. The tragedy is that Genie's father wasn't just a monster, he was a mirror. His prison was the extreme, grotesque reflection of what all controlling systems aim to do: erase identity, suppress voice, and enforce obedience. He simply had no need to hide it behind laws, institutions, or rituals. His architecture of silence was literal. Society's architecture of silence is invisible. And here's the question you must ask yourself. If one man could shape a child's world so completely that she emerged at 13 without words, without movement, without identity, what has the larger system done to you in ways you don't even notice? Because silence is not just the absence of sound, it is the absence of self. And Genie's father proved that silence, imposed long enough, can rewrite what it means to be human. Rescue is a word that tastes sweet in the mouth. It feels noble, heroic, cleansing. But when Genie was rescued in November of 1970, what unfolded was not salvation. It was transfer. Transfer from one form of control to another. The straps of her father's potty chair were replaced with the observation notes of doctors, the gaze of scientists, the experiments of linguists. She had been imprisoned by silence at home. Now she would be imprisoned by curiosity in the laboratory. The first stop was Los Angeles Children's Hospital. Doctors and nurses crowded around her frail body, recording every abnormality like archivists of suffering, her posture, hunched and shuffling, her teeth crooked and malformed, her weight, barely 59 pounds, her vocabulary, non-existent. She was 13 years old, yet her presence resembled a half-grown child who had been pulled prematurely from the womb of darkness. The notes are clinical, detached, but underneath, something else stirs, the excitement of discovery. Because, for the scientific community, Genie was not simply a victim, she was an opportunity. You see, for centuries, philosophers and scientists had asked a forbidden question. What happens if a human being grows up without language? Theories abounded. Some said language was innate, wired into the brain. Others insisted it was learned, imprinted by environment, but no one could test it, because to test it would require something monstrous, a child raised in isolation, denied words, denied human contact. No ethical society could allow such an experiment, and yet here she was, a living experiment, already performed in secret by her father's obsession. Genie became overnight the most valuable subject in the history of linguistics and developmental psychology. The journals would never admit it outright, but beneath their clinical tone was exhilaration. The forbidden experiment had walked into their hospital on two frail legs. Teams were assembled, grants were secured, cameras began rolling. Her silence, her vacant eyes, her animal-like posture, all of it was catalogued, studied, dissected, and slowly, carefully, they began to prod at the mystery. Could she learn language now? Could she recover what had been stolen? Or had the so-called critical period for language already closed, leaving her forever mute? But the early signs gave them hope. Genie began to use words, single words, then short phrases. She pointed, she labeled objects, she began to reach toward communication. To the scientists, this was gold. Each syllable she uttered was a data point, a treasure, a revelation about how the human brain unfolds. They filmed her, taped her, recorded every fragment as if she were not a child but a window into forbidden knowledge. But here is where the tragedy sharpened. Genie herself was not the focus. Her humanity was secondary. What mattered was what she represented, a chance to answer questions no laboratory could ethically explore. She was a child, but she was also a case file, a project, a key. Do you see the pattern? Her father used her to enforce silence. The scientists used her to unlock secrets. 2 prisons, different walls, same consumption. For a time, the world was intoxicated by her story. The press swarmed. The label "feral child" spread through headlines, feeding the public appetite for the grotesque. She became a spectacle, a mystery for newspapers to dramatize and scientists to mine. And though the language was different, the principle was the same. Genie's existence was no longer hers. It belonged to others. The deeper horror lies in what followed. Because at first, the institutions promised protection. They promised to heal her, to nurture her, to give her the life she had been denied. But institutions, like individuals, are driven by hunger. And once her novelty began to fade, once the grants dried up, once the experiments lost their shine, Genie was discarded, passed from one foster placement to another, neglected again, abandoned again. The very structures that declared her a national responsibility let her slip back into silence. Understand this, the system never wanted to save Genie, it wanted to use her. She was the perfect subject because she was voiceless. She could not resist. She could not speak her own narrative, and once her usefulness expired, she was as disposable as the research notes stacked in university archives. This is the forbidden truth no headline ever dared print. Genie was not rescued, she was consumed. And I want you to feel the weight of that, because this is not just about one girl in Los Angeles in 1970. This is about a pattern that repeats at every level of power. Systems are not built to save you. They are built to extract from you your labor, your attention, your energy, your silence. Genie's tragedy is not a historical anomaly. It is a mirror. Think about it. How many times has society promised to protect you, only to exploit you instead? How many times has a government, a corporation, a leader declared salvation, while secretly harvesting your life for their own ends. Genie was strapped to a chair by her father. You are strapped to a chair by your institutions, your screens, your debts, your laws. Different tools, same principle. Her father silenced her with violence. The system silences you with distraction, bureaucracy, and endless noise that leaves no room for your true voice. But the result is the same. You are studied, you are consumed, and when you are no longer useful, you are forgotten. And so I must ask you, how much of Genie is in you? How much of her silence, her exploitation, her abandonment do you carry without even realizing it? Because the moment you see it, the illusion of safety dissolves. Rescue is not what it seems. For Genie, rescue meant another prison. For you, rescue often means the same. Pause. Step back. Look at the pattern. A child is silenced by her father. Then she is consumed by the system. Finally, she is abandoned when her usefulness ends. That sequence, silence, exploitation, abandonment, is not just Genie's story. It is the algorithm of control, the blueprint of psychological warfare. And once you see it here, you begin to see it everywhere. Think about the silence. For Genie, silence was imposed with straps, growls, beatings. For you, silence is imposed differently, through distraction, censorship, endless entertainment that dulls your awareness. You are drowned not in absence of sound, but in a flood of meaningless noise that achieves the same effect. It leaves no space for your true voice. You scroll, you consume, you repeat the scripts given to you. But when did you last speak in a way that was entirely your own? Then comes exploitation. Genie became the most valuable subject in modern psychology because she represented a forbidden experiment. The scientists wanted answers, not her healing. They studied her hunger, her gestures, her words. Every fragment of her life became data, material, resource. And when her usefulness ran out, they abandoned her. You are treated the same. Your labor, your data, your attention, all harvested, packaged, and sold. You are told you are cared for, but in reality, you are farmed. And finally, abandonment. Genie was shuffled through foster homes, neglected again, abused again, until she disappeared into the margins of the system, out of sight, out of mind. Tell me, what happens to you when you are no longer productive, no longer compliant, no longer useful to the machine? Do you think it will cradle you? Or will you too be discarded into silence? This is the hidden genius of psychological warfare. It doesn't just oppress you, it makes you complicit in your own erasure. Genie did not resist her fate, her silence because survival demanded compliance. You don't resist the system's silence because survival too seems to demand it. Work, pay, obey, smile, perform. The bars are invisible, but they are no less real. Here is the bitter truth. Genie's tragedy is the most extreme, concentrated version of the same process shaping you right now. She was strapped down. You are strapped in, to debt, to distraction, to duty. She was denied words. You are drowned in words, yet none of them are your own. She was consumed by scientists. You are consumed by systems. And the same cycle waits for both: silence, exploitation, abandonment. Do you feel the weight of that? Because this is not history, this is blueprint. The psychologists who surrounded Genie claimed neutrality, claimed science, claimed the pursuit of truth. But beneath those claims was hunger. Hunger for prestige, hunger for answers, hunger for control. That same hunger operates in the institutions you trust today. Governments claim to protect you. Corporations claim to serve you. Media claims to inform you. But what lies beneath? Hunger, the kind that consumes until nothing remains but silence. And the cruelest twist, just like Genie, you are told this is rescue. The hospital was called a place of healing. The experiments were called education. The foster placements were called protection. But each one was simply another theater of control. Rescue was rebranded imprisonment. Healing was rebranded consumption. Do you see how easily words are turned into weapons? That is the essence of psychological warfare, to trap you in illusions, to make cages look like care, to make exploitation look like opportunity, to make abandonment look like necessity. And the most terrifying part, once you internalize it, you police yourself. Genie learned not to make a sound because she feared punishment. You learn not to resist because you fear exile, poverty, ridicule. The cage no longer needs a jailer once it is inside your mind. Now listen closely, because here is where the system's shadow grows sharp. Genie's life exposes the blueprint because it is stripped bare. Her father didn't cloak his violence in bureaucracy or laws. He strapped her down with wood and wire. The scientists didn't cloak their hunger in kindness for long. Their cameras recorded her like an artifact. The rawness of her story makes the invisible visible. Her silence unmasks your own. And this is where men must wake up, because the system does not just want compliance, it wants surrender. It wants you to forget your own strength, your own voice, your own fire. It wants you domesticated, neutered, docile. Genie's silence was forced. Yours is engineered. Different paths, same destination. So ask yourself, how much silence have you inherited without question? How many times have you called your cage a home, your leash a gift, your consumption care? Because the blueprint does not stop with her. It extends into you, into your family, into your work, into your future. This is why Genie's story was buried in footnotes and academic debates. It was too raw, too revealing. It showed, without disguise, how systems consume the vulnerable, how control masquerades as care, how silence is engineered as survival. And if people truly absorbed that, if they saw how her life mapped onto their own, they might begin to resist. They might begin to see the bars around them. They might begin to break. But the system does not want you to break. It wants you to bend, quietly, silently, until you disappear. So I will ask you again directly, how much of Genie is in you, and how long will you allow the cycle, silence, exploitation, abandonment, to continue, before you remember that silence is not survival, it is surrender? After the cameras stopped rolling, after the research teams lost interest, after the grants dried up, Genie was left to vanish. The institutions that once fought for access to her now forgot her name. Foster homes cycled her in and out, each one leaving fresh scars. One caretaker locked her in rooms again, echoing her father's cruelty. Another starved her, withholding food. The promise of rescue turned into a carousel of fresh torment. Her voice, that fragile, trembling voice she had begun to discover, withered. She stopped speaking again. Do you see the cruelty? She was not only stripped of childhood by her father, she was stripped of recovery by the very system that claimed to save her. Silence reclaimed her. Not the silence of straps and chicken wire, but the silence of neglect, abandonment, and indifference. By the 1980s, the world had moved on. Genie, the miracle case, the wild child, the star of documentaries and journal articles, was gone. She had been absorbed and erased. The scientists who once fought over her fell into bitter disputes, each accusing the other of exploitation, as if arguing over the corpse of a feast. The truth is simpler. They had all fed on her, and when there was nothing left, they discarded the bones. Today, Genie lives hidden in a private facility in California, her location closely guarded, her name scrubbed from public mention. She is alive, but erased. Alive, but untouchable. Alive, but forgotten. And here is the most chilling detail. You were not supposed to know this. Her story, once a headline, has been buried. Universities locked the files. Officials sealed her records. Journalists turned away. Why? Because Genie is not just a girl. Genie is evidence. Evidence of what power does when no one resists. Evidence of what institutions become when given the chance to consume without limit. Evidence of what silence produces. Obedience, emptiness, erasure. Her father silenced her to erase her humanity. The system silenced her to erase the evidence of its own hunger. 2 cages, 2 predators, 1 victim. And this is where paranoia becomes revelation. If they could do this to her, what are they doing to you? Think carefully. Genie was extraordinary because her suffering was visible. A house turned into a tomb, a girl discovered after 13 years of silence. It was too grotesque to ignore. The system had to respond, but once the spectacle was consumed, once the headlines faded, she was erased. The blueprint completed itself. Silence, exploitation, abandonment, erasure. Now look at yourself. You live inside systems far more sophisticated than Genie's father's house. You are surrounded by technologies, laws, narratives, entertainments. Your silence does not look like hers. But do you truly believe it is different in essence? The system does not need to strap you down to erase you. It simply buries you in routine, in obligation, in noise that keeps you from seeing the bars. You disappear not by chains, but by compliance. This is the cruel genius. Genie's story shocks you because it is extreme, but its extremity blinds you to its familiarity. You shake your head at her suffering while living in a softer version of the same prison. She was silenced by force. You are silenced by choice engineered into you. She was studied as a subject. You are astute, died as a consumer. She was abandoned when no longer useful, and so will you be, the moment your productivity ends. And the final stage, erasure. Not just your silence, not just your exploitation, not just your abandonment, but your memory itself. Who will remember you when you are no longer useful? Who will keep your voice alive when the system has no more need for you? Genie's life answers that question brutally. No one, unless you resist, unless you learn to see the bars, to reclaim your voice, to resist silence as survival. Understand this, silence was both Genie's punishment and her survival. But survival is not life. Survival is waiting for erasure. The same is true for you. As long as you comply, as long as you bend, as long as you accept the noise and call it freedom, you are only surviving. And survival leads to the same place, disappearance. That is why her story matters, not as a curiosity, not as a tragedy, but as a prophecy. Genie is not simply a victim of one father's madness or one institution's greed. She is the mirror held up to your own face. She shows you what happens when silence wins. And this is the final warning. Erasure is not sudden. It is gradual. It begins when you accept silence as comfort. It grows when you accept exploitation as normal. It deepens when you accept abandonment as inevitable. And it completes when you vanish so fully that no one even remembers you existed. That is why the system buried Genie, because her life revealed the blueprint too clearly. And if men saw that blueprint for what it was, they might resist. They might refuse silence. They might demand voice. They might break the cycle. But most will not. Most will keep scrolling, keep working, keep nodding, keep surviving, until silence swallows them whole. The question is not what happened to Genie. The question is, what is happening to you? Will you too be silenced, exploited, abandoned, and erased? Or will you speak, truly speak, before the system finishes its work? Because once the erasure is complete, there is no recovery. Genie proves that. This is where the illusion ends. You've walked through Genie's house of silence. You've watched the scientists feed on her. You've seen the system discard and bury her. And now you must see yourself. Because her story is not locked in the past. It is alive. It is repeating. It is inside you. Think of what happened. A father sealed his windows, built a cage, and starved his child of voice. A system swarmed, consumed, extracted, and abandoned. And then silence returned, not as healing, but as erasure. That cycle is not history. It is the cycle of control. It is the blueprint written into every power structure that governs you. Look at your own life. How much of it is truly yours? The words you speak, are they your own? Or rehearsed lines from screens, ads, scripts drilled into you since childhood? The work you perform, does it build you, or feed a system that sees you only as labor? The silence you carry, does it protect you, or slowly erase you? This is the warfare they don't name, psychological warfare, not bombs, not armies, but cages built for the mind, cages that keep you docile while believing you are free. Genie's father strapped her to a potty chair day after day until her silence became reflex. You are stern, wrapped to glowing rectangles, scrolling hour after hour until distraction becomes reflex. Different cages, same purpose, silence the self. Do you understand yet? You are not an observer of her story. You are a participant in the same design. And here is the cruelest twist. Genie's silence was visible. Yours is invisible. Hers shocked the world. Yours is normalized. That is why her story had to be buried. Because it showed too clearly what systems do. It risked waking you up. Her father used wood and wire. Your institutions use credit, policies, entertainment, and endless choices that are not choices at all. Her father punished her for sound. Your systems punish you for dissent. Her father abandoned her when she no longer fit his control. Your systems will abandon you the moment you cannot produce, cannot obey, cannot conform. And what comes after abandonment? Erasure. That is the final stage of warfare. Not just to silence you, not just to consume you, not just to discard you, but to erase you so completely that you are forgotten. That is what they did to Genie. That is what they will do to you. Look around. How many men lived entire lives of labor, compliance, silence, and now no one remembers their names? How many voices were never spoken because they were swallowed by fear, by duty, by distraction? This is not accident. This is design. They want you silent. They want you erased. They want you disposable. And the most dangerous thing you can do, the only act that threatens them, is to resist silence, to speak, to reclaim voice. Not the words they gave you, but the ones you forge yourself. That is why Genie terrifies them, because her life revealed the fragility of their illusion. She showed that silence is not natural, it is engineered. And once you see the engineering, once you name it, you are no longer docile. You are dangerous. But here is the warning. Resistance has a cost. Genie's attempt at voice was met with punishment. Yours will be too. Step out of silence, and you will be mocked, shamed, exiled. Step out of silence, and the system will target you. That is the nature of warfare. The moment you resist, you are seen as enemy. So you must decide. Will you remain in the chair, strapped by invisible cords, silently scrolling until erasure comes, or will you risk the punishment of voice? Because there is no neutral ground. Silence is surrender. Silence is complicity. Silence is death before death. Her story has been buried, but now it is in front of you. You cannot unhear it. You cannot unknow it. The question is what you will do with it. Understand this. Genie will never come back. Her voice was stolen forever. Her life was consumed and erased. But yours is not finished. Not yet. You still breathe. You still see. You still have a choice. Though not for long. The system is efficient. Every year it tightens its grip. Every year the cages grow subtler. Every year the erasure accelerates. You think you have time. You don't. That is why I speak to you now, with no comfort, no softness, no illusions. Because men must wake up. Men must see. Men must resist. Or men, like Genie, will vanish into silence. You have been warned. The architecture of silence is already around you. The question is simple. Will you sit quietly until it consumes you? Or will you stand, speak, and risk being heard? Because once you are erased, there is no return. You may think Genie's story is an isolated tragedy, the madness of one father, the failure of one system. That is the lie. The deeper truth is this. Her confinement was not unique. It was a microcosm, a test run, a mirror of the very structures you live under every single day. Think carefully about what was done to her. She was not raised. She was manufactured, not into a full human being, but into a fragment. A muted, unfinished creature, half alive, half erased. That was not neglect, that was design. And what is modern society if not the same? Do you believe you were raised into full men, full beings? Or were you too manufactured, into workers, into consumers, into docile fragments of what you could be? Look closely. From the first years of your life, silence was imposed. Not physical silence like Genie endured, but psychological silence, the silencing of instinct, the silencing of rebellion, the silencing of the dangerous hunger for truth. School desks were your restraints, bells were your chains, tests, scripts, rules, all the quiet machinery to train you into obedience, not to awaken you but to cage you. They taught you what to repeat, not what to question. They trained you to whisper the approved answers, not to roar your own. And when you left school, another system took over. Work, time clocks, paychecks, surveillance, hierarchies. You became a number, a replaceable part in a machine so large you cannot even see it. And like Genie strapped to her chair, you sit strapped to desks, screens, or assembly lines, silent, disposable, half alive. Do you see it yet? Her cage was built of wood and wire. Yours is built of schedules, contracts, algorithms, but the principle is identical. Silence the spirit, extract the labor, and discard the shell when it no longer produces. The evidence surrounds you. Look at the cities. Millions of men moving in silence, heads dulled, eyes fixed on devices, mouths closed in public. They pass each other like shadows. No voices, no resistance, no fire. This is not freedom. It is mass captivity disguised as choice. Genie's father feared sound. Your institutions fear the same. That is why dissent is punished, why truth-tellers are mocked, censored, or destroyed. Every man who dares to speak outside the script is branded dangerous, extremist, insane. Why? Because sound breaks silence, and silence is their fortress. The darkest truth is this. Genie was not the only child raised feral. You were too. You just don't recognize it. You were deprived of something more insidious than food or light. You were deprived of initiation, the knowledge that transforms a boy into a man who cannot be ruled. They erased it from your culture. They burned it from your history, and in its absence, you were left unfinished. A domesticated animal in human form. That is why men today wander restless, hollow, addicted, numb. It is not weakness of character. It is engineered incompleteness. You were designed never to fully awaken. And here lies the second truth. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You realize the cage is everywhere. You realize the silence is not an accident but a weapon, and you realize that those who rule you have always known this. Do you think it is coincidence that empires rise and fall on control of knowledge? Do you think it is accident that the oldest texts whisper of forbidden teachings, hidden initiations, truths only for the elect? No, they understood the principle. A silenced man is a controlled man. A voiceless society is a conquered society. Genie's father did not invent this. He was only a crude echo of a much older, much darker architecture. The pharaohs knew it. The emperors knew it. The church knew it. The corporations know it now. Silence is not emptiness, it is strategy. It is the means by which the many are kept docile by the few. And you are living proof that it works. You have obeyed, you have whispered, you have swallowed your questions, you have silenced your own fire to avoid punishment, exactly as Genie did. But here is the crack in their system. Once a man names the silence, he cannot remain in it. Once he sees the cage, he cannot unsee it. And once he dares to break it, even with one true sound, he becomes uncontrollable. That is what they fear most. Not armies, not weapons, but voices that refuse to die. Understand this. You are being tested. Right now. This very moment. Every word I speak to you is dangerous because it lights a spark they want smothered. If you feel your chest tighten, your pulse quicken, your mind resist, that is the system fighting back. That is the silence trying to reclaim you. Resist it. Stay with me. Do not let the silence win, because Genie's tragedy cannot be undone. Her voice was extinguished. Her story was erased. But yours has not been written yet. The system still thinks you are asleep. It still thinks you are docile. It still thinks you will obey. Prove it wrong. The only way forward is transformation. Not comfort, not escape. Transformation. And transformation begins with words. Words that cut through the silence like fire through dry wood. If you understand what I'm telling you, then write it below. Twice. Burn it into memory. Burn it into the algorithm. The phrase is this: I will not be silent. Write it 2 times. That is the symbolic break. That is the first strike against the silence that has ruled you. Do it now, not later. Now. Because if you wait, the silence will return. The cage will close, and you will remain unfinished, half alive, forgotten. Genie was erased, but you have a chance to resist, and it begins with voice. Listen close. This next layer is where the war becomes surgical. If Section 7 showed you the cage, Section 8 shows you the tools. the calibrated instruments by which elites refine silence into a weapon. They do not need batons and boards the way Genie's father did. Their instruments are subtler, colder, and far more effective. Data, surveillance, psychology, ritualized distraction. These are the levers they pull while the masses sleep. Imagine a laboratory where the subject is not a single child, but an entire people, where engineers and psychologists conspire with advertisers and bureaucrats to shape behavior at scale. It sounds like fiction, but it is engineering, social engineering, practiced every day in boardrooms and command centers. They map you the way a hunter maps prey, your rhythms, your weak points, the exact stimulus that will make you look away. They do not break you with blunt force. They bend you with design. First, surveillance. Not the cinematic cameras you picture, but algorithmic sight. Systems that watch without eyes, track without looking. Every click, every pause, every late-night scroll is a breadcrumb. That data is harvested, passed, assigned a profile, and sold. They know what makes you angry, what comforts why. Now, what snuffs your curiosity. They tune the feeds, push the dopamine, and keep you occupied while they redraw the boundaries of acceptable thought. The surveillance is not about catching criminals, it is about mapping deviation and then neutralizing it before it matures. The surveilled do not lead revolutions, they stare at screens and repeat the curated story. Second, behavioral science, not the crude punishments of Genie's father, but laboratory-tested nudges calibrated by economists and psychologists. Little pushes here, little rewards there, enough to reprogram desire. They test headlines, thumbnails, even the color of a button to see which version keeps you scrolling 2 minutes longer. They dole out outrage in measured doses, so you stay enraged, but never organized. Anger becomes currency, diversion, a tether. You are taught what to feel and when to forget. This is precision control, 1,000 tiny cuts that over time numb your reflex to question. Third, narrative control. Institutions monopolize meaning by packaging complex realities into digestible stories. They sell you a map that excludes whole countries, whole histories, whole truths. They offer simple villains and saints so you can feel safe inside a story, while the real mechanics of power shift unnoticed. When knowledge is compressed into headlines and sound bites, your capacity for sustained thought atrophies. The elite know this. They shape the narrative so you never develop the habit of deep attention. In place of thought, they give you consumption. In place of courage, they offer outrage and forgetfulness. Fourth, rites and rituals of distraction. Festivals of consumption, endless entertainment, addiction-engineered platforms, all ritualized to keep the masses occupied. A population that is constantly entertained is a population that does not revolt. Rituals are social glue, yes, but they can also be anesthetic. They train you to seek comfort over challenge, novelty over depth, applause over truth. Your attention is the battlefield, distraction, the smokescreen. The more you binge, the less you resist. And then there is the science of silencing dissent. Not overt censorship in every case, but algorithmic burying. Bury the message, not the messenger. Algorithms can bury a truth under an avalanche of noise. True voices are drowned out by engineered storms of content. Real resistance is sidelined not by force, but by attention diversion. When everyone is shouting, the important words get lost. That is the modern tactic. Drown the signal in white noise until no one hears it. Finally, the monetization of identity. They fragment you into consumer cohorts, reducing complex interior lives into purchase patterns and ad targets. You become an economic profile, and systems optimize you for predictability. Unpredictable human flourishing, curiosity, dissent, deep learning is costly to their models, so they engineer you toward predictability, narrow preferences, safe opinions, repeatable behaviors. Conformity becomes efficient, deviation expensive. The architecture penalizes the unpredictable until you self-regulate to fit the algorithm. This is how silence is weaponized, not by removing voice entirely, but by reshaping the conditions in which voice arises. They prefer a society that speaks in permitted ways, where dissent never gains traction because it never finds an audience. They do not have to break you physically. They make you speak in patterns they can anticipate, monetize, and control. And there is one more edge to this blade, the co-option of the very men who should resist. The elite's greatest weapon is recruitment. Invite the brightest into systems of influence, yield to be inside, and you will adopt their habits. When insiders stop asking hard questions and start polishing resumes, the system's critique evaporates. Some men become guardians of the silence because it pays. The cage gains architects from within. That is how the machinery perpetuates itself, by converting talent into maintenance personnel. So what do you do with this knowledge? Do you curl into despair? Do you rage impotently? No. The point here is not to leave you paralyzed. It is to make you precise. Once you understand the instruments, you can learn to subvert them. Awareness is not enough by itself, but it is the first tool. Once you see the levers, you begin to avoid them, to speak in ways that refuse monetization, to craft rituals that demand attention rather than divert it, to train your mind for depth instead of distraction. You must become surgical in return. Learn the mechanics of the feeds. Build habits that deny them your data. Cultivate attention like a muscle. Speak in forms they cannot monetize easily. Books, gatherings, direct mentorship, craft. Protect your circle from algorithmic venom. Train men to listen, to remember, to pass on knowledge that cannot be quantified in ad revenue. That is how you create noise they cannot swallow. Because the elite's power is not mystical, it is engineered, it has limits. Place your attention where it matters. Physical communities, deep learning, apprenticeships, ritual, and you begin to erode the systems that refine silence into weaponry. But understand this as well. Dismantling the machine will cost you. It will draw fire. It will brand you inconvenient. It will make you vulnerable. That is the test. Genie's price for voice was punishment. Yours will not be comfortable either. The system is adaptive. It hits back. Yet every act of deliberate attention, every unmonetized conversation, every true right you restore, dims a part of that machine. The tools are revealed, the experiment is exposed, the surveillance is mapped. Now choose, remain passive and be engineered, or become intentional and disrupt the instruments that turn your silence into a weapon against you. The choice is not neutral, it is your life, your voice, in the balance. Now you have the map. You have seen the cage, the instruments, the appetite that consumes the vulnerable. You have seen how silence is manufactured and sold back to you as safety. This section is not consolation. It is a manual, crude, necessary, ruthless, for rebuilding voice, agency, and men who do not vanish. If you want to survive beyond mere comfort, if you want to be remembered rather than erased, if you want to live loud enough that silence cannot claim you, then listen like a man who knows the price of what he abandons. First rule, reclaim your attention as a weapon. Attention is the soil in which identity grows. The modern world steals it, fractionates it, and sells it back as distraction. Take it back deliberately. Start with a daily ritual of undistracted attention. 30 to 60 minutes of reading, practice, or craft without a screen. No multitasking, no feeds, nothing that fragments your mind. Train attention like iron. It will be the first thing they try to wear down. Make solitude a training ground, not an avoidance tactic. In solitude, you will learn your voice. Second rule, build apprenticeship into your life. The culture ripped away rites of passage because rites make men accountable and unpredictable. Replace them intentionally. Find a craft, woodworking, metalwork, blacksmithing, martial art, writing, farming, and find an elder who demands excellence. Real competence is the opposite of consumerism. It is costly, slow, and unprofitable to the algorithm. Develop skills that cannot be reduced to a profile. Pass them on. Apprenticeship creates lineage. Lineage resists erasure. Third rule, create unmonetized circles. Most of your interactions are engineered to be visible, tracked, and profited from. Forge small groups that meet offline, in real rooms, where conversation cannot be harvested. Make promises there. Speak truths you won't repeat online. Hold one another to a standard of transformation, not approval. These are not protest groups. They are memory makers and transmission engines. They are how voices survive beyond algorithmic appetite. Fourth rule, cultivate ritual that sharpens rather than anesthetizes. Replace consumer rituals with rites of initiation, labor, and storytelling. Morning workouts, apprentices' evenings, communal meals where phones are locked away. These are not quaint. They are defensive architecture. Ritual binds men to purpose, not applause. Ritual creates a record. The system cannot eat what is not offered in clicks. Fifth rule, refuse junior-level humility. The system trains submission through bureaucratic smallness, constant approvals, tiny rejections, endless forms that break spirit piece by piece. Learn the craft of escalation. Demand standards. If you are ignored, escalate attention to those who can act. If you are silenced, find new mediums that bypass their gates. Zines, local talks, analog newsletters, printed essays. Paper resists deletion. Paper remembers. Sixth rule, steward your health like a non-negotiable covenant. Hunger, sleep deprivation, substance dependence. These are soft prisons the system installs to keep you compliant. Physical discipline is not vanity. It is the foundation of resistance. A body that stills under pressure is a body that can be erased. Train, sleep, eat well. The practical is spiritual. Seventh rule, learn memory and storytelling. The battle for history is won by those who remember and by those who teach. Your grandfather's stories, your failures, the unvarnished narratives, keep them. Teach them to younger men in ways that do not require a server. Stories are infectious. They are the antidote to engineered forgetfulness. Eighth rule, practice selective exposure. You cannot fight every front. Choose your battlefields. Commit to one domain where you will grow influence. Craft, local politics, education, community defense, mentorship. Sow deeply rather than widely. The elite's advantage is scale. Your counter is depth. Become indispensable in one place. From there, spread. Ninth rule, learn to speak in forms that resist monetization. Publish in books, hold private salons, record lessons on physical media, build schools that trade on excellence, not clicks. The algorithms profit from repeatable patterns, create depth that is slow and costly to reuse. This denies their economy while building your legacy. 10th rule, form accountability with danger in mind. Resistance invites pushback. You will be ridiculed, deplatformed, legally challenged, or surveilled. Assume it. Prepare contingencies, legal counsel, trusted backups of your work, redundancy in communication channels. Build redundancy like a defensive fortress. The system fights by attrition. Outlast it. None of this is comfortable. None of it is glamorous. It is hard and humiliating and lonely at times. That is by design. The easier path is to fold. The harder path is to carve a life that refuses the slow erasure. Make your life a record people cannot easily delete. Last, teach your sons and brothers the grammar of resistance. Language matters. Teach them not to whisper when the room needs shouting, not to perform virtue, but to embody duty. Real men are not born from noise. They are forged in the practice of speaking truth, keeping promises, and dying for what they gave voice to. If you keep this, their erasure becomes harder. There will be costs. Expect them, but also expect reward. A life that matters, a lineage that remembers, and a voice that is not rented for profit. Genie's fate was the absence of these things. Her world had no apprenticeship, no ritual, no real community to resist erasure. Learn from that absence. Build its opposite. Become the man who cannot be catalogued and therefore cannot easily be erased. This is the work of your life, not performative protests, not viral outrage, deep, stubborn, analog commitment. If you do this, you will not be immune to attack, but you will be harder to swallow. The machine learns from resistance. It adapts, and every time it adapts, it exposes another seam. Exploit it. You know the phrase. You wrote it twice. That was not for show. It was the first hammer stroke. Keep hitting. Forge loudness that matters. Forge legacy that remembers. Forge a life that will not be quietly disposed of when usefulness ends. Begin today, not tomorrow. Silence is a disease. Speak to cure it. This is the last hour of the file. The case is closed and the charges are clear. You have been shown a child erased, a system that devoured her, and a mirror that reflects your life back at you. What remains now is the verdict and the sentence you will choose for yourself. This final section is not a pep talk. It is an indictment and a promise. Choose well, because some choices can never be reversed. First, the indictment. Systems will not stop because you feel bad about them. They will not stop because you have empathy today and forget tomorrow. They will stop only when enough men refuse to be consumed. Genie's erasure was possible because too few people maintained memory, courage, and legal pressure in tandem. The institutions that ate her nourished themselves on indifference. That is your true enemy, the comfortable consensus that looks away. Second, the promise. If you commit to refusing erasure, you will not walk an easy road, but you will walk a road that matters. The promise is simple. Men who refuse silence leave traces. Those traces become maps for others. They become anchors. They become the memory the machine cannot legally scrub away without drawing attention. If you make a stand, privately and persistently, you become the seed of opposition. That is how movements begin, not with spectacle, but with quiet, relentless refusal. Here is a practical endgame, hard and specific. Pick one of these and begin tonight. Form a local circle of 5 men. Meet weekly. No phones. Each member commits to one skill and one teaching. Rotate who leads. The circle is your memory bank and your resistance cell. Create a physical archive, not digital. Paper, print, photographs, a locked chest. Record names, stories, lessons. Teach someone to read them aloud. Memory stored in analog resists deletion. Mentor one younger man directly for a year. Teach him your craft. Teach him to keep a promise. If your life is a ledger, make sure it contains at least one apprenticeship. Host a monthly salon where you read a long book aloud and discuss it in depth. Invite no more than 20 people, no devices. The salon builds attention muscle and creates community too valuable to be monetized. Build redundancy in your communications. Keep backups offline. Have at least 2 ways to contact key people that do not rely on public platforms. Practice them. If you do none of this, the system will proceed as it always has. Your life will be accounted for and then forgotten. You will be catalogued, and when you are no longer useful, your name will be archived and then scrubbed. If you do these things, you create a counter-system, small, resilient, and human. That is enough to change outcomes. Now hear me plainly. Resistance will attract fire. Expect legal harassment, social shaming, and attempts at marginalization. When it comes, respond with discipline, not bluster. Discipline scares them more than fury because it endures. Train patience, train legal literacy, train networks of support. The system is precise. You must be precise too. This is where the moral courage comes in. Genie could not choose. You can. Choosing means accepting the loneliness of first followers. It means being the man who does what he says, not the man who posts what he feels. It means being remembered for deeds, more than for applause. Do this, and your life will be a living objection to the machinery of erasure. The final thing I will say, and say plainly, is this. If enough men remember, tell the truth, and steward one another, institutions change. They do not change from theory, but from practice. The practical memory you build will shape policy, culture, and future generations. It will force the systems to adapt in ways that cannot devour human beings so nakedly. That is power. It is not viral. It is durable. Genie's story is a warning and a map. She shows what happens when silence wins. She also, in her discovery and the brief light of attention that touched her, shows what happens when people pay attention. The rest is up to you. So stand, speak, teach, build, protect, remember, not tomorrow. Today, you have been handed a choice between being catalogued and consumed or being a maker of memory. Choose to be remembered. Choose to leave a ledger that cannot be casually deleted. Choose to be the kind of man who, when the history books are written, is not a footnote but a name. The quiet is not safety. The quiet is surrender.